At 5:30 a.m. on September 1st, 1939, train whistles pierced the quiet streets of London. Children, some barely able to carry their own bags, lined up with gas masks slung over their shoulders. No one knew exactly what awaited them. Would they ever see their parents again? This was Operation Pied Piper, the largest evacuation of children in British history, and it began with a single, shocking question. How do you protect millions of innocent lives when war is imminent, and bombs might fall at any moment? Imagine being 8 years old, standing on a foggy platform as the sun struggled to rise, surrounded by strangers who were to become temporary guardians. Mothers hugged children tightly, some unable to let go, knowing they might never hold them again for weeks, maybe months. Fathers gave quiet instructions and vanished into the city, returning home only after helping others board the trains. The rail cars were packed, and the engines roared as they carried children into an uncertain countryside. The fear in the eyes of children was mirrored by the tension of the adults. Teachers, volunteers, and local authorities worked tirelessly, ensuring that each child received a tag, a ration of food, and a stamped ticket to safety. The streets of London, Birmingham, Manchester, and Liverpool emptied as parents and guardians said goodbye, unsure if their homes would survive the coming raids. Some children cried openly. Others tried to be brave. Every face reflected the same emotion, fear of the unknown, but also a fragile thread of hope. The story of Operation Pied Piper is not merely one of trains and farewells. It is a story of human resilience in the face of an imminent threat, of a nation attempting to save its youngest citizens before the war touched their cities. The evacuation would eventually relocate over 1.5 million children, moving them to rural towns, villages, and even private homes far from industrial centers considered likely targets for German bombers. This operation, though carefully planned, was not without chaos. Some children were separated from their parents permanently. Others were placed with strangers, adjusting to new customs, meals, and expectations overnight. Yet in every railway station, in every village, the same quiet determination took hold. Children must survive, and a nation would find a way to protect them. To understand the full magnitude of this mass evacuation and the extraordinary challenges faced by both children and guardians, we need to look at the historical context that made Operation Pied Piper not only necessary but urgent. By the late 1930s, tensions in Europe had escalated dramatically. Britain faced the looming threat of German aerial bombardment. Military strategists anticipated that cities with dense populations and industrial centers would be primary targets. Protecting civilians, particularly children, became a top priority for the British government. The Ministry of Health and the newly formed Evacuation Executive began planning in earnest. The plan was unprecedented in scale. Children would be transported from urban areas considered vulnerable, like London, Coventry, and Liverpool, two rural regions considered safer from bombing raids. Schools, families, and volunteers in the countryside were prepared to receive evacuees. On short notice, public awareness campaigns educated families about evacuation procedures. Parents were instructed to pack essential items, including clothes, ration books, and gas masks. Children were given identity tags with their names, addresses, and destinations. Volunteers organized logistics, ensuring the trains were ready, shelters prepared, and reception committees in rural areas briefed. On the morning of September 1st, the first wave began. Railway stations overflowed as thousands of children boarded the long-distance trains. Teachers, guardians, and local officials accompanied them. The countryside reception committees, often made up of farmers, small-town residents, and volunteers, waited with lists of names, ready to match children with homes. These hosts had little notice and no certainty about how to care for children of all ages. But the mission was clear: provide safety at any cost. The operation was not limited to rural England. Some children were sent to Scotland, Wales, and even Northern Ireland. Temporary accommodations included schools, barns, private homes, and converted public buildings. Challenges arose quickly. Language and cultural differences, unfamiliar foods, and the emotional strain of separation caused anxiety for children and hosts alike. Yet adaptation was swift. Community spirit strengthened. Lessons were taught in barns. Shared meals built trust. The evacuated children learned resilience in a way few adults could imagine. The government also faced logistical obstacles. Transportation schedules were tight, and railways were under pressure from military mobilization. Supplies were limited, and shelters had to be organized quickly. Each train ride carried not just children but also the hopes and fears of parents left behind. The risk of air raids on the way to the countryside, while small, loomed in every adult's mind. Despite the risks, Operation Pied Piper set a precedent in civil defense. It demonstrated that preemptive evacuation could save lives on an unprecedented scale. While not perfect, some children suffered mistreatment, confusion, or trauma. The operation succeeded in protecting millions from immediate harm. It showed a nation willing to mobilize resources, plan meticulously, and act decisively to shield its most vulnerable from the looming horrors of war. From this backdrop of fear, planning, and resilience, the actual journeys, challenges, and extraordinary human stories of children surviving evacuation begin, which leads us directly into the main story. At 6:15 a.m. on September 1st, 1939, the first whistles echoed through London's railway stations. Children, many in pajamas and carrying only small bags, were guided onto packed trains. Teachers held registers tightly, counting heads again and again. Mothers kissed tear-streaked faces, whispering, "Be brave, we will see you soon," while fathers waved from platforms that were already crowded with anxious families. The air was thick with fog, nerves, and the weight of uncertainty. The trains rumbled through the countryside, leaving behind the soot-stained chimneys and quiet streets of cities soon to be targets. Inside, strangers became companions. Children clutched their seats, listening to the rhythmic chug of the locomotive, unsure whether the countryside would be calm or dangerous. Some whispered fears aloud: bombs, enemy planes, never seeing their families again. Others tried to sleep, burying their heads in scarves, pretending the world outside the carriage didn't exist. Upon arrival at reception towns, children were met by volunteers, local families, and officials holding long lists of names. The first challenge was placement. Each child needed a host family, but mismatches were inevitable. Some children were welcomed into warm, caring homes. Others faced strict, indifferent, or even hostile guardians. The emotional toll was immediate. Homesickness, loneliness, and fear of the unknown shadowed every day. Life in the countryside presented new survival challenges. Children accustomed to city streets, markets, and schools were suddenly surrounded by fields, livestock, and unfamiliar routines. Some were expected to help with farm chores, tending animals, carrying water, gathering firewood. Daily life became a mixture of work and learning, balancing practical survival with continuing education. Teachers set up classrooms in barns, sheds, or large living rooms. Lessons were taught under flickering oil lamps, while distant sirens reminded them that war still loomed beyond the fields. Adaptation required courage, Older children took responsibility for younger ones. Peer bonds formed in the absence of parents. One 10-year-old reportedly said, "I was scared, but if I cried, my little sister would cry too. So I had to be brave." Shared meals, bedtime stories, and collective chores fostered resilience. Though technology that trains, rationing systems, and communication networks supported the evacuation, it was human endurance that determined its success. Twists came unexpectedly. Some trains were delayed due to military mobilization. Others were rerouted to avoid potential air raids. Children sometimes arrived at towns where hosts were unprepared or absent. Officials improvised, turning churches, schools, and community halls into temporary shelters. Food shortages tested resourcefulness. Children learned to share, ration, and adapt to unfamiliar diets. Emotional scars ran deep as separation anxiety persisted. But over time, children and hosts learned to coexist, finding moments of humor, kindness, and fleeting comfort. Not all stories ended well. Some children fell ill or suffered accidents while adjusting to rural life. Letters from parents arrived slowly, fueling worry and homesickness. Yet, even in tragedy, heroism emerged. Teachers comforted crying children, neighbors shared meals, and volunteers risked long journeys to locate missing evacuees. These acts, though small, carried immense significance, preserving hope amidst uncertainty. The war above the countryside was quiet compared to the cities, yet danger was never entirely gone. German reconnaissance flights occasionally passed overhead. Occasional nearby bombings reminded children that safety was relative. The Evacuees learned vigilance, self-reliance, and how to navigate unfamiliar terrain. Survival was not only physical but emotional. The true test of Operation Piper came during the first major air raids on London in September and October 1939. Families in the cities endured bombing, while their children were safe, miles away in the countryside. Communication was slow. Letters could take days or weeks. The anxiety of parents contrasted with the gradual adaptation of the children. This separation, though traumatic, proved the operation's critical purpose, protecting lives even at immense emotional cost. In one story from 1940, a group of Evacuees in rural Warwickshire faced a local flood. Trapped in barns surrounded by rising water, the children had to work together to move supplies, rescue livestock, and ensure their safety. Teachers guided them, instilling calm while managing practical tasks. This incident highlighted a key lesson. Survival depended on cooperation, resourcefulness, and courage. Ordinary children were forced to grow up quickly, learning responsibility and resilience under duress. Meanwhile, host families adapted too. Many had never cared for children not their own, yet they embraced the challenge, creating routines that balanced safety, schooling, and chores. Shared hardships, long walks to fetch water, tending animals, and rationing food built bonds between children and hosts. The Evacuees learned that survival was communal, dependent on trust and empathy. It was a microcosm of wartime society. Everyone had a role, and the success of one depended on the cooperation of many. Technology and logistics, though secondary to human endurance, played vital roles. Trains ensured mass relocation, while rationing systems prevented starvation. Schools improvised classrooms, teaching literacy, arithmetic, and practical skills. Identity tags, organized lists, and volunteer coordination minimized chaos. These systems were tested under immense pressure, and while mistakes occurred, the framework enabled the evacuation to succeed on an unprecedented scale. Twists in the story emerged as children aged in the countryside. Some adjusted seamlessly, forming lasting friendships. Others struggled, longing for home, facing bullying, or questioning authority. Emotional resilience became as critical as physical safety. Letters from parents provided comfort, but also reminded children of the ongoing dangers in their hometowns. The psychological aspect of survival, the quiet courage required to endure separation, was as profound as any physical challenge. The resolution of Operation Pied Piper was not a moment of dramatic triumph, but a quiet validation. The children survived, the cities endured, and lessons in civil protection were learned. By the end of 1940, millions of children had been relocated successfully. Casualty rates among children in urban bombings were drastically reduced compared to initial projections. The program demonstrated that careful planning, combined with human courage, could protect the most vulnerable in unprecedented circumstances. Operation Pied Piper also taught a moral lesson. Survival during war is not only about weapons or technology, it is about foresight, empathy, and societal organization. Children, uprooted from homes and thrust into the unknown, proved that resilience is often learned in adversity. Communities, strangers united by shared responsibility, demonstrated that humanity could prevail even when the world itself seemed chaotic. By the conclusion of the evacuation, both children and hosts had grown in unexpected ways. Bonds formed in barns and rural homes persisted. Skills learned, adaptation, teamwork, courage, under fear lasted a lifetime. Operation Pied Piper was not flawless. Some children experienced trauma and hardship, but the overarching truth remained. The program saved lives and set a precedent in civilian protection during modern warfare. In essence, Operation Pied Piper was a story of survival in the truest sense. It was not a battlefield victory, nor a heroic charge, but a triumph of planning, courage, and humanity. Through fear, separation, and challenge, millions of children endured the perils of war, emerging not unscathed, but alive, resilient, and profoundly changed. The lessons of endurance, preparation, and compassion resonate far beyond the confines of 1939 Britain, offering timeless insight into how societies can protect the most vulnerable when the world descends into chaos. Operation Pied Piper remains one of the most remarkable civilian efforts of World War II. Millions of children were uprooted from familiar streets, homes, and schools, and sent into the countryside with strangers, often thousands of miles from everything they knew. For parents, it was a wrenching decision. For children, a test of resilience they could never have anticipated. The evacuation was more than a logistical exercise. It was a story of courage, endurance, and humanity under pressure. Children faced fear, homesickness, and uncertainty, yet many adapted to new routines, chores, and learning environments. Host families, often unprepared and overwhelmed, stepped up, providing shelter, guidance, and care. Teachers improvised classrooms in barns, churches, and rural homes, ensuring that education continued even in the midst of upheaval. This mass movement of children also revealed the emotional and psychological costs of war. Separation anxieties, trauma, and the challenge of forming trust with strangers were constant realities. Yet, in these very hardships, communities discovered strength. Shared responsibility, empathy, and cooperation became essential tools of survival. The evacuees learned to navigate not only the countryside but also the complex terrain of human relationships, resilience, and adaptation. Operation Pied Piper teaches a timeless lesson. Survival is not solely about protection from bombs or physical threats. It is about preparation, courage, and the strength of community. The program saved countless lives and demonstrated the power of foresight and compassion in the face of war. It was not a dramatic battle with soldiers and weapons, but a quieter, deeper Victoria triumph of human endurance, cooperation, and hope. I've just said what's recorded in history. You should find out the real truth yourself. We have written the sources from which we got this story in the description of this video, and we have always been and will be supporters of the oppressed, regardless of their color, race, or country. This world and its creator are also with the oppressed. If you found this story compelling, like and comment your thoughts below. Subscribe for more forgotten World War II stories that honor civilians and children who endured unimaginable challenges. See you in the next WW2 story.